and the integration of plowing and animals living together and not disturbing the environment where they are in. That's agroecology. Tota hela in essence is the old way of practicing agriculture in simple terms.
In simple terms.
Yes.
And now when we speak of that agroecology, especially now that we are taking us back to the olden days, how we used to do our farming, how does it contribute to Botswana's agricultural sustainability goals? So we know where we want to go, and now we want agriculture, we want ourselves to be, self-subsistent. We want to be able to hold up our economy agriculturally. So how can it contribute towards agricultural sustainability goals of us, Botswana, Diteko?
It's about finding the balance between the production from the agricultural side and the environment. So in terms of going forward, as you said, mentioned in your question, for us to be sustainable, we should be aware, considering what already we've seen in the past years, in terms of the climate. I mean, I don't have to go far. If you look at the beginning of this year, probably the first 5 months, we had one heat wave after the other. So the question is that now with the heat like that, it damages the soil health, because agroecology, as Sibanda mentioned, it's about the soil health. So the soil health, all the crops they come from the soil. When you get rains, it is the soil, including them, that retain that. So now it is the sustainability that is about finding that balance between your environment and your production, because in absence of that balance, meaning that now there's too much damage that is on the soil, then even if you push if you try to achieve that sustainability, but you won't be able to achieve that, because eventually your soil health starts suffering. So it's a challenge that you are faced now in these modern days.
Now, speaking also of that challenge, this has been a question as well, in as much as we want to grow in farming, even in livestock production. Let's go into farming, let's go into livestock breeding. How does the balance come into play there, especially given the climatic condition right now and given our weather here in Botswana, what's happening right now? As we continue like that, how do they coexist? If we increase livestock but we have little rains and our soil keeps on degrading, how do we maintain the balance, and how do we make sure that eventually we are able to be sustainable in our farming practices?
One of the ways to do that, I don't think there's only one solution to that. The first thing that we need to do, as we've observed over the years, is I think what you need to accept now is that Botswana, as we all know, it's a semi-arid country. Yes. So we have to find ways in terms of the little rain that we get, in terms of how do we capture that water. That is number one. The second thing, when it comes to animal, we've observed over the years, there is what I would call indigenous animals, then there is what I would call exotic animals. So the indigenous animal within this region of Southern Africa, which should be your Tswana cattle, the Mashona cattle, the Tuli, the Nguni, what you find about them is that because they are indigenous, they are able, one way or the other, to sustain this type of climate vis-a-vis what I would call the exotic animal. So the question is then, which route do we take? Yes, we bring in exotic animal, and because we believe that maybe we try to improve what is there. I can give you an example. I mean, this is a fact which has been informed by a scientist, is that when you take an exotic animal, which I won't mention name, vis-a-vis a Tswana one, you find the heifer that is female, that is fully grown. The exotic animal will be weighing around 700 kg. A Tswana one will be around 400 kg. When they give birth at the same time, their calves at 6 months will be the same weight. But you find that that exotic animal is feeding about 25 kg a day. Your Tswana one is feeding only 12 kilogram a day. So the question then, what makes sense? So this is where we start applying science into creating this balance that you're talking about, because we need to get all the actors in the industry, it could be the animal scientist, you know, to advise us. So
Right. I think you have perfectly explained it, Diteko. Now, moving on with our conversation on agroecology, how can it support Botswana's economic growth, Sibanda? What are those measures that we can look at and say, you know, agroecology, when it comes to our economy in Botswana, these are the gaps that we want to address, these are the gaps it can fill, and in what measures or the strategies that we have there?
It's policies. We have to have policies for agroecology. We have to go back to our indigenous seeds because, you know, they were working for us because they were for our situation. And also indigenous knowledge, because people in their respective areas, they know their story, they know their indigenous, say like things like meroho. Yes, they know, and now that on its own, it promotes Botswana, the smallholder farmers, with that knowledge and with the indigenous seeds, even if it's dry, they can have something to put on the table. Unlike this seeds that we have now, giving an example, last year, no, not last year, 2 years ago, I didn't even get anything from my farm. I had only 2 plants from 2 hectares. So you can see, whereas my neighbor had indigenous maize, I was getting food from her. And now the issue as we speak is indigenous seeds have been phased off. We are no longer getting indigenous seeds. Where we have, like in some countries, you can't share them like before. You see?
Right.
So
probably I can add on something to here is when you talk about indigenous seeds, let's also look at indigenous plants. I don't know if you probably at your age, when I grew up, there was what you call motorokwane, prickly pear, which would grow just in a desert, no rain. And you go, I've been to countries like Chile, they grow prickly pear and export it to Europe. So the thing is now that we catch the fad and do something that we think is fashionable. No, I'm going to plant avocado. But the thing is that, does your climate allow you to do that? Then you find that probably does not. For you to do it, then you have to produce it under a controlled environment, which then in terms of capital is very, very high. Then the question is, why don't you focus on those where you have a comparative advantage, the plants that are suitable to your climate, and then excel. We already established NADI, which has been established by government to do research in agriculture. Then focus on things that naturally grow in our climate and see how can we improve on this where we become net exporters. Not try to copy or no, because now globally the avocado, it's one of the things that it's health. Now we want to grow avocado. You know, tomorrow comes so you jump into the other thing.
Right. Now, I'd like for us to get into that, actually, the challenges around agroecology that Botswana is facing. Also, how do we strike the balance there? When we're speaking of our indigenous knowledge, you know, our indigenous capability and strength as Botswana, we are so strong in that area. We have a lot that we can invest in and actually expand in. So what are those challenges and what are the ways to streamline there? I mean, when you give that example of avocado, you are talking about also diversification. Sometimes we speak of diversifying our agro space in Botswana. We speak of diversifying, bring in some, you know, exotic fruits and vegetables, see how they can perform in our economy, specifically looking at the economy aspect of things. So how do we strike the balance there? How do we make sure our indigenous knowledge is still, you know, prominent and is still being promoted accordingly? And, you know, we also are taking care of our climate, we're taking care of our, you know, yes, the overall environment of Botswana.
Let me
Start with Massive.
then he can come in.
Yes.
That's why now we are into this agroecology and engaging even the government. Kadi support letters. Please let's include agroecology. You know, we are from past Malebu declaration.
Yes.
Now we are going, next year, we are going into the CAADP Kampala declaration. And then if agroecology was left out, it's a 10-year strategy. It was going to be a problem. That's why we chipped in as an association. And that was not just us. It was the whole of East and Southern Africa. The Farmers Association from those areas. And the civil society saying, here we are, let's include agroecology. And even at the COP, much as it was not mentioned, the conversation was agroecology everywhere. Every pavilion, every side event that the farmers were in, they were pushing in agroecology. Then we are hoping that COP30 is going to include agroecology, the way it was emphasized.
Right.
Looking at the situation of Botswana, some of the things that you have requested for years, talking about agroecology, we need to have a defined ecological zones of the country in terms of the balance. Because let's be honest, you can't say the climate in Kasane is similar to the climate in Kang or in Safari or in Good Hope. So once you define the agricultural, the ecological zones, that will inform the farmers in terms of which crop is more suitable to produce in a particular area. We've already doing the grains, that is the maize in Pandamatenga, because of things of availability of water and other things. We're seeing that there's a lot of livestock production in areas of Khanzi. So once we inform people that will put us in the right direction, because otherwise the capital, because the thing is about the cost. How do you manage? Nobody is going to jump into this and do it for free, including even government. So if you want to make it sustainable, we also have to manage the cost. So once we do that, and then people understand that, no, these are the ecological zones, and this information is available. So it will help in going forward. Rather than where we plant anything where we want, then because it discourages people come from home is just all a waste of money. So we need to define the ecological zones. So this means now getting Bonabonadi on board, getting the meteorological department, especially the agrometeorologist on board, working with the agronomist and coming with all this plan. This is what will help.
I like the fact that you've already laid out the recommendations before I even asked the question. Right. Now, we have said a lot in that area. I think we're also seeing the gaps there, and of course you have also come up with recommendations for those gaps. But now we're talking of technology as well. The new technology is also coming into play at this moment. How does technology come in to help it or to complement agroecology in the aspect of Botswana and the practices that are taking place in Botswana? How do we make sure we employ technology, make really good use of it in this mandate that we want to push of agroecology? Ms. Sibanda.
Take CA, for example, conservation agriculture. It's practiced widely in our neighboring countries, South Africa, and they are doing very well. Because that conservation agriculture, in the situation where we don't have the rains, already that conservation had retained a little bit of water. Unlike if we do irradial now, if there are no rains, nothing happens. And we were blessed because our sister association is in South Africa through the regional platform. We were so surprised to see conservation agriculture working. We tried to train the farmers here. We got a small funding from somewhere. Then we trained about 50 farmers. But it was all new to us, and including the extension officers. So now you see where it's going.
Yes.
Because surely if the extension officers could embrace the technology, then the farmers automatically will be in the know-how. But if all of us are blank, then it becomes a problem.
Right.
And that technology of conservation, they use the right tools. So if you use the right tools, then you are okay. But if you use hose, how long can it take you to finish a hectare, for example?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, we're now
precision
pressed.
and precision farming
Yes.
is practiced all over.
All over the world,
And
yeah.
we need that. Yes.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time. Unfortunately, we are pressed with time. We are out of time, but this is a conversation that we can definitely continue also in other forums. Quite important also engaging the relevant stakeholders like you have already labeled out. We'll continue to talk more about Agenda 2063, eliminating hunger by then. But thank you so much for your time and the effort that you are putting in as the association here in Botswana. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.